This is the Second Chance at Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Hassig. Come join me as we remove confusion from the hottest health topics by discussing the latest research, along with what we've seen with thousands of our patients and amongst our community, family, friends, and people all over the nation and world. Let's dig in. Hey, this is Dr. Brad Hassig with the Second Chance at Health podcast. On today's episode number 19, we're going over the Feel Fabulous for Fall Part 2. It's the carnivore diet with my special guest, Dr. Wade Anunson. Dr. Wade is a fellow chiropractor. He is a functional health expert, podcaster extraordinaire. He's been a good friend. We shared a great mentor and several great mentors. So he's been on his own. You've heard my life journey and why things have really shifted and come into focus. He's got an amazing story for why he's wanting to share his wealth of knowledge in the world of health. So today we're going to go over the carnivore diet. We've had so many questions about this, and I knew exactly who I wanted to talk to shed some light on this. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Wade, for agreeing to join me. I know you're a busy guy, so I really appreciate you being here today, brother.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an honor, Bradley. It's an honor.
Awesome. Well, tell me, just give an explanation of what the carnivore diet is and how it differs from other, low carb types of diet. I know a lot of people have done keto or paleo. Usually that's a place that a lot of us have started before we even get here. So give me kind of your idea on how it differs from those diets.
Well, I think part of the easiest clarification is, and I would have to set this as a preface, is I'm not a fan of any diet, quite frankly.
Love it.
I'm more into ancestral eating and our ancestral history as to how we as humans continue to adapt. And my whole focus, my center of focus has been homeostasis, understanding the brilliance of the body and why and how the body adapts and what its hierarchy of resources required to efficiently adapt to our environment, physically, emotionally, environmentally, chemically, all of that.
Awesome.
Spiritually as well. So
awesome.
If we can lay that piece down first, then I can look at why the carnivore diet rings true for human beings historically. And this does not mean I want to make any other diet wrong. What I'm really truly trying to say is if we're talking about achieving health, then it's a very different conversation than if we're talking about trying to socially consume food or socially with a social agenda or a theme in our narrative in our society. That means we should move away from anything animal products and we should eat all vegetables in terms of vegetarian. And there's a long history as to why that does not perpetuate the regeneration of our species. Okay. Yep. So I see this as a number of just basic foundational ways to look at food. And in that same token, I don't want to make food a micro focus or a hyper focus where people now get fixated on everything they put in their mouths as though there's a good and a bad and there's a judgment on it. Because I have also lived in that window, and that's not fun, and taking care of patients who have really gone extreme there, and that does not create health either.
Right.
It creates a new stress, right?
Yeah,
as you
exactly
know. So we don't want to create a hyper focus either. So all that being said, now we can just basically discuss carnivore. I was full keto for 5.5 months straight. Specifically, I would say 6, but it was, to be accurate, I was 5.5, very rigid. I would test and check my blood 3 to 4 times a day to make sure I was in ketosis while I was dealing with thyroid cancer. And that came on suddenly, which was bizarre. Number of things had to transpire for that to happen. But in terms of my journey with completely changed my focus in practice by way of simply becoming awakened or aware of, okay, this is the direction, either God wants me to go, or I'm just, okay, now I'm at attention. I have to deal with this. I had to change my life. I had to let certain things go. You might remember that time back in 2019, which I'm thankful it was 19 and not 20, because I wouldn't have been able to.
Praise Jesus.
Yes, I've been guided and blessed. So in January 8th of 2019, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer from a routine. I call it routine because I was shaving and I had a lump on my neck. And I look over, I'm like, whoa, that's right on my thyroid. And I'm like, that's not a good thing, I think. And so it took me a day or so to tell my wife, because I knew if I did, she wouldn't sleep that night. So I waited, and next day, and she's like, yeah, we should get that looked at. So we went in for a routine, ideally a routine look at it. And they're like, we'll do a biopsy. And 95% of the time they're benign. So, okay, no big deal. I have a clean health history. My waist size hasn't changed in 30 years, 40 years, actually.
I was going to say, Dr. Wade is incredibly fit. I'm sure he'll be humble about it, but he's one of the fittest guys that I know in a healthy way of doing things. So yes, go ahead.
Well, and I certainly, thanks, Brad, but you're in great shape as well, my friend. So you're ripped.
It's a pursuit, yeah.
That's the pot calling the kettle black.
There we go.
So what turned into be routine turned out to be the 5% chance of cancer. They said, hey, you've got cancer. And they kind of like did an about face, and we're going to need to do this and this and this. And I said, whoa. Wait here. This is completely not on my radar. You know how most of the time we think we may go this way or we may go that way, or there's some inherent fear back there, and that's what we draw near. Cancer was never on my radar. So it wasn't my thing. It wasn't the way I was going to go. And 3 years prior to that, we did some blood work, and I was found by a colleague who didn't understand it at the time. I was found to have high iron. Well, I had been taking some supplements that were also iron rich, and it was a mineral supplement. It was a whole food supplement, multivitamin, but it had some iron in it. And I'm like, you know what? So back then I was going through a little fatigue, but it wasn't crazy. I was working out, doing my thing and practicing. And I'm sure we were going to seminars together at the time, Dr. Brad. And, but I think Dr. Frank had already passed. Yes, he had passed. And so I discovered hemochromatosis, and we didn't know what to do with it. I mean, actually we didn't know it was hemochromatosis. It was just high iron. So we thought, all right, well, this is what you do for that. And we didn't even know at the time. I just stopped taking the supplement, changed my diet a little bit, cut down on the red meat, and literally my iron panel the next time down was less, which is actually bizarre, as I understand iron now more, and hemochromatosis at a greater depth. So now we go to 2019, that diagnosis is there. Turns out I didn't want to go through traditional surgical means. We're here at UW, I'll say it, University of Wisconsin hospitals. I've had a love-hate relationship with them for years. They're it's a very high quality healthcare system and hospital, but it's also it's also very political. Let me put it that way. So the bottom line is I didn't want to go through that structured kind of dogmatic way. So I flew out to Oregon and got tested holistically, and was working with it was a form of acupuncture, but she did not do traditional acupuncture anymore. There was no more needles. She was doing vibrational and frequency work. And so not only were we running tests, she was treating me multiple times in a weekend. I'd literally go there on a Friday, right out of the office, or Thursday night, maybe skip Friday, as I recall, treat Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, Saturday midday, Saturday night, fly home Sunday morning.
Wow.
And then go back 2 weeks later and do the same thing, and then retest. And what she was really doing is getting my body ready to detoxify all the heavy metals of lead, mercury, and iron. Yeah. And so the iron accumulation was part of the toxifying straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, in the thyroid. And in hindsight, so I had swelling and I had trouble swallowing. At times I could notice a lump in my throat, and then just kind of wrote it off, and then it started to make sense. So I asked my provider, and this is what I think all patients should have a team of providers willing to expand their expectations to the point of reality, pragmatism, but most importantly, what are the patient's goals, right?
Yep.
So what was my goal? My goal was to save my thyroid, treat my body holistically, and if I could heal it on my own, I want to do that naturally and not take parts out or use drugs or radiation if possible. So my wish was that. I also had to be a realist, so I had to look into what that meant. All right, so if I'm going to be able to fly out here back to 2020, I never would have been able to do that. I'd have been local here. I'd have been stuck. I'd have been in a situation where who knows, right? So whatever, hindsight's 2020. But here I am, no pun intended there.
Yeah.
But in 2019, I was able to fly 6 times out there back and forth in 6 months and treat with her and learn a ton and also realize the respect. Because again, one of the things people will chime in at times about other providers, and I had plenty of colleagues that told me this, was, oh, you should just take this and chelate that out.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was I had 2 experts. I had a great team around me. You know, I had Kathy around me for insight. I had some of the other folks around for insight. I didn't ask everyone, but I had a couple really close. You remember David, who's also very connected, David Markarian.
Oh, yeah.
He was also very helpful because he and my my PhD acupuncturist that was taking care of me in Oregon and he's in Washington. They both recommended the same surgeon in Seattle. It's so funny. And they did not know each other, but they both recommended the same person. This is the guy, if you need to see anybody, this is the guy you need to see.
Yep.
So fast forward, I went through the 6 months. I asked them, my whole team of people, I said, what's realistic? Can I give this 6 months? Do I need 3 months? Can I give it a year? And I said, I'd be willing to give it 6 months. Is that real? You know, and they're like, that makes sense. Sure. I think we should be able to see change in 6 months. And if not, we'll know what to do at that point.
Yeah.
So boom, I went all in holistic like I planned, gave it everything I had, both here, there. I was the patient. I wasn't the doctor. I had to completely let go of that. I was just like, I trust you guys. You're the one. I'm going to not try to outthink this.
Yep.
So it turned out that the swallowing got a little more difficult. It wasn't completely arrested. It took about 4 weeks for me to get ready to start to pull the heavy metals out and to get my liver ready, to get everything ready, because iron toxicity is a strain on the liver. Not only that, but hemochromatosis basically rusts the body. So I was prematurely rusting. And, you know, the silver lining there, Dr. Brad, is that I have come from a family of 7. Okay, so 6 siblings, and I have basically over 40 nieces and nephews right now. So I'm number 6. My mom died of a stroke. My dad, Alzheimer's, terrible diffuse idiopathic sclerosing hyperexostosis, for those folks who don't know what DISH is. Picture a candle burning and the wax running down the side, and that's what the spine turns into. So Dr. Brad's very familiar with that, back from school.
That's right.
But DISH is basically the melding of all those tissues, bony tissue, ligament tissue, some connective and muscle tissue, turning calcific. And that's what happens. It just like fuses together and it's rigid like a rusty nail instead of movable joints. And so then we go back to their family. So my dad's dad, Alzheimer's, when Alzheimer's was brand new, they didn't even, you know, they were just starting to coin the term. His wife, a stroke. My mom's dad, a heart attack. My mom's mom, a stroke. Why is that significant? Because I got the HFE homozygous hemochromatosis, which is by both sides of my family gift, my family tree, delivering genetic iron disorder for absorption, meaning there's no turnoff switch in my digestive tract, which most people will have a turnoff switch, like I'm only going to absorb this percentage of iron from this burger or this steak or whatever. And so my body just has no turnoff, so it just would consume it. Anyway, that was a beautiful learning experience for my whole family, because then not only once I knew that and what it was, then I could help my siblings. And there's That's 3 awesome. More of us that have it, and there's 2 that we know for sure don't, and 1 still might. But for that fact, 2 don't, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And the 4 of us that do, know we do. So now I've been able to help them become
That's
aware,
awesome.
number 1, and then manage it. So, Yeah, so that can help in the long run, and most people don't discover that until they're in their 40s anyways. Men specifically till they're in their late 40s, women postmenopausal once they start really cranking up the iron, because estrogen is a magnet for it, which is why women catch up for heart disease, which is iron related later on. So, sidebar. Then you have to apply why carnivore if you're hemochromatosis, because I'm also a type O, and an O thrives on animal protein. And an O is a hunter-gatherer by ancestral nature. So when I went vegetarian when I was younger and I didn't know, I was the most injured, the most weak, and the most inflamed that I've ever been. Felt like crap. But I was in it, and I thought that was the right thing to do because that's what they were teaching us. That's the healthiest thing.
Right. Crazy, isn't it?
I've been just rattling. Do you have anything you want to?
No. I'm loving that. I love. That's the particular, like we talked about before, a particular diet, and the information's great, but your personal story and why it's important to you, and your journey of how you came to where this is at. And I love, that's one of the things when we talk about what you're doing for your family, for humanity. With podcasts, whoever ends up seeing this, if this helps somebody in your podcast and however many people you help with that, but you're leaving that legacy of your story, what you've found out, the information, how you've tried to heal yourself to be able to share that with others. I mean, that's amazing. I always try and tie in a Bible verse with each episode, and that's in 3 John 1:8. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. And what better way? We're supporting each other in doing this. You're supporting your family, and then whoever we reach with doing this. So no, that's great. Continue on.
That's a beautiful verse, by the way. And the funny thing is, I don't like hearing myself talk. So it's not a big enough excuse to not talk. Right. And the reality is, if this helps one person, you start talking about iron overload.
Yep.
What I also discovered in that window of opportunity was I got to meet, so I was at a conference, another buddy of mine who I just met heard my story because we all had to stand up. There was like 18 of us at this workshop in Vancouver. He heard my story, and again, he goes, "You need to meet my guy, Morley."
Wow.
So I'm like, okay. He goes, "That you need. That's why I'm here. Apparently, that's why I'm here." He goes, "You need to meet Morley."
Wow.
So he hooks me up with Morley. We become fast friends. Morley teaches me great understanding of iron and hemochromatosis, turned me on to several books. I read 6 different books on it in a short window of time because I was a sponge for the information.
Yep.
Tons of questions. He's been on my podcast probably close to a dozen times. First one being Frankly Speaking with Dr. Wade, which has 100 episodes and ended, which was the impetus to speak. And then I knew it would evolve, and now my current one is called Life Force Radio, and my passion there is to rekindle the conversation, which Dr. Brad is doing specifically here, which is why I'm honored to be on this show. Not only because he's a longtime friend, but he's a good, sound human being who wants to make a difference and impact, not only through his family, but what you do in your practice, which I appreciate.
Well, thank you.
So
thank you.
The life force part of it is people are missing the understanding that the body has within it this intelligence that's already on board. It just needs the ability to express. You say that in so many different ways.
Yep.
But that message can be said in 1,000 or 1,000,000 ways so that everyone can understand that it's a self-healing, self-regulating. But there's so many things we've put on top of it that cloud the ability for it to express health, which is all we're trying to really uncover here today. So hemochromatosis is a limitation, but it doesn't stop me. It's a gift for humanity. The more I understand, the more I teach people how to look for it. So when I tested a bunch of my patients who are not hemochromes, they are just like you, most of you folks, because the hemochromatosis numbers are 1 in 268 Scandinavian descents are hemochrome. Okay. 1 in 268.
Wow.
Okay, so that's the likelihood. But nobody will find out, number one, medicine does not test for it. Number two,
Okay.
you might find out by one of the top 5 symptoms. What are the top 5 symptoms? Heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, diabetes.
Wow.
What are those linked to besides everything else?
Right.
So having high iron isn't just for hemochromes. Where did it come from? From 1956? I mean, Brad, sorry to go off on this.
No, hey, I told you I want this to go where it goes, and I love this. I love this direction.
I'll wrap the hemochrome part out and get right into carnivore as an answer, though, because it does apply. Because there's the controversial discussions around it need to be clarified as to what's actually factual. And it does come back to just avoiding a food doesn't mean you corrected anything.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if in 1956, it's called the Delaney Principle, a legislator in New Jersey made a administrative law. So they created a law that said no carcinogens can be put in food except one. And what is that carcinogen? Most of you won't realize it is iron. Iron. And there's 9 forms of toxic iron that are put in your food that will cause iron overload and create imbalance and run oxidative stress, which is leading to all top of those inflammatory diseases.
Wow.
So I found that roughly a half of the chronically, I took a bundle of 30 some patients over the course of the next 6 or 7 months that I'd seen for years that were dealing with chronic problems, and I asked them to get an iron test, which is not expensive. It was under $100.
Yeah.
Get an iron panel. If we see that it's an overload, we can change it. If it's hemochrome, which we discovered several hemachromes as well.
Wow.
Yep, which has been life-changing for them and their family.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But the shocker was the great percentage of individuals all across the board that were in iron overload that once we dump that iron, they are doing amazingly better as a result, and they don't have to keep looking back because they didn't actually have a genetic disorder. They just had a food accumulation over time disorder that was creating iron imbalance and metabolism in the body.
So are those people like you were just, because this is new to me. I mean, as much, and this is I love to learn, and as much as I've studied nutrition and functional health, functional medicine, all that stuff. I mean, this is new information to me. When you were talking about how they don't have, or you don't have, the hemochromes don't have that switch to turn it off so it doesn't keep absorbing and you basically rust. Is those people that are in overload, do they still have the switch and it's just getting overloaded because they're getting it in food in addition to everything else, stuff they plan on, they know they're getting, but then they're getting a lot more? Is that what it is?
Okay, so great question. It's also not just an easy answer because iron metabolism, this will go back since 2020 was mentioned. Let's just talk about what most of your patients want to do now that they realize their immune system is weak. They want to take vitamin C every day. People are telling them to take zinc every day. I'm just going to bring that up because the long-term use of zinc, as an example, competes with copper. Copper metabolizes and allows iron to be metabolized efficiently. The scope of copper and iron looks like this. Okay. Iron is a football field. Copper is a penny on the field. That's the ratio of iron to copper in the body. Iron, copper's way down here.
Yep.
However, zinc comes in, and now copper cannot metabolize iron. The next thing is, so that will throw the ratio off. Just like vitamin D will throw the ratio of vitamin A and D off because they both compete for the same receptors. D gets all the attention. Yep. A helps you metabolize and helps the liver metabolize iron. And the number one organ for iron storage is the liver. The heart, okay, among things. So we have to understand that iron overload, yes, comes through the diet. It also comes through the most commonly diagnosed anemia, which is iron deficiency anemia. Now, I'm going to be bold and say, which is very accurate, by the way, by all the research I've done in the books I've read, not only Jim Moon is probably one of the best ones. Iron, it's called Iron, the Most Toxic Metal. Jim Moon, his name is spelled
Moon.
Either JYM, it's JYM.
Okay.
So JYM Moon, and it's called Iron, the Most Toxic Metal. In there, he has over 2,400 cited references. So fact upon fact upon fact. And the real key is the tests they run medically when they check for ferritin or saturation are only limited in what they're really. There's more to an iron panel. In that book, there's an iron. The iron panel is there, but it involves UIBC, TIBC, transferrin, serum iron, and ferritin. And so part of the reason that you can't get a great picture just from ferritin is because those are like empty shells in the blood. Plus now we need to talk about ECF and ICF. And what they're measuring in the blood is ECF, which is extracellular fluid. They're not measuring what's in the tissues, and that's where iron is doing the destruction.
Okay. Interesting.
So to answer your question, I'll simplify that knowing those. When you get the reading, it's inaccurate, number one.
Yep.
So you don't know. You look anemic, they throw iron at you.
Yep.
You keep needing it, but you're really not iron deficient. You're blood iron deficient. According to those numbers, but the tissues are congested, which is inflamed.
Yep. Okay.
And you can't convert energy. So how does something so valuable like iron, which carries oxygen, become a problem? Well, when it gets stuck in the cell, it destroys it by rust and oxidative stress.
Wow.
And copper allows it to be metabolized and transform and be utilized. And in healthy, normal individuals that are not hemochromes, it just cycles out. And with women, they bleed it out monthly, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, it's funny that you say that because I've had two females tell me that where they were copper deficient. I mean, here within the last month, they were copper deficient because they were taking so much zinc. And I'm like, well, how much? And, and then I also tie that into, you see females that are osteopenic or osteoporotic. And they're like, well, I did my blood test and my calcium was fine. I was like, but it's the opposite. It's not getting in the tissue. And I'm like, you have to have something that takes and delivers it to that. So luckily, as you know, there's different nutritional protocols and things that you can do that. So it's amazing. You take something with vitamins or minerals and you think some is good. So let's take a whole bunch of it and do it indefinitely. But
more is better.
The more the better, but there's a price to pay. The body is, and I love how you said that. The body isn't a temple. The body's God's temple, and it's part of Him, innate intelligence. Part of Him is in all of us, and when we start thinking we know better, and let's start messing with the controls, and it usually doesn't go too well.
Right. Well, I'll take that segue on bone density, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and we look at the vehicle with which bone generation. So look at an example. This wall behind me is made of drywall and studs, okay? The drywall is like the mineral phosphorus, vitamin D, and minerals for building bone. Let's just say calcium, because it's only one of them. Those minerals, among many, so several others, right? But alkaline phosphatase is a hormone that is built by the body for also regenerating bone, and it's made in the liver. All right, well, protein are the studs. Without the studs, that wall is paper thin. I can punch a hole in that with no problem. Brad and I are wrestling. I bump into the wall. I fall through the other side because it's basically paper. It's sheetrock with no real structural, just other than, it's got its width and it's got nothing in between. Well, the bone matrix is made of protein. So protein digestion, now we're moving towards the carnivore piece, is crucial for bone development and bone regeneration with added bone stress, right? So if we impact the bone, it says, as you know, Dr. Brad, it stimulates osteogenesis by way of demand supply. Now let's make sure we have some supply. And what Dr. Loomis found, as well as Dr. Howell years ago, so this is based on their enzyme work, their brilliant enzyme work years ago, and I started doing Loomis work 12 years ago. that was profound in my life because it filled a lot of holes in with my chiropractic care. That was patients would get better, but structurally, when we gave them nutrition, they would only get so far. And it was like, what was changing? And I'd ask the old practitioners, as you probably have, and to be like, they responded better structurally with care because they had better nutritional fulfillment that allowed the structural care to build upon and just have greater results, right? Better outcomes. Now the nutrition is so weak, the structure is weak, the integrity is weak, the neural functioning is poor. The stress is different, it's higher, it's more chemically related, and it's harder to get those same magnified results. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're trying to, I don't care how new your car is and fancy your car is, you're running it on bad gas. You know?
Perfect. Well done. Boy, you summarized that quick. I'll let you do the talking.
You taught me well. You taught me well.
Keep it simple, stupid. So I get nerdy with some of the stuff because the questions that come out of it are like, well, protein's bad or meat's unhealthy or it's bad for the environment. Wrong, wrong, wrong. We've been misfed this fallacy that it's part of the demise of the planet. But folks, you have to realize who's given that information. Number one, the industry of food is one of the biggest supportive mechanisms for entering the industrialized healthcare machine that we have. And nutrition is supposed to be complex, so you can't figure it out. So by this conversation, what we ultimately want to say is ancestral eating focused around foods that were local in that area of those indigenous tribes and humans at that time. So if we go to Weston Price, he did tons of research throughout the world and found that no specific tribe was completely vegetarian. Not one. They used some form of animal products, organ meats, or something. Even in the blue zones, we know that the discovery of C15 is profound and found in dairy products such as mountain goats. The higher the grass they feed on, the more C15 they find in it, which is huge. In their blood work, their testing shows the highest levels of C15 in the world out of all those tested. And we now know that that's an essential nutrient. It's essential fatty acid, which actually assists in reducing cellular fragility. So I would say that hemochromatosis increases cellular fragility. They're more fracturable, they're more brittle, they're more challenged, they're more stressed. So C15 actually adds to that cellular membrane to keep it soft, supple, and fatty, which is what it is, because it's now we're talking about cholesterol.
Interesting. Right? So that's if I'm understanding that correctly, that's why when people would say, well, how is somebody that's having difficulty with a buildup of iron, why would they eat red meat with lots of high iron in it? But once again, it's getting back to a natural state. It's not taking iron. Yes, there's iron in red meat, but it's in a source that your body, a natural source that your body over, thousands of years has learned how to break down, take the things that you need. And it's in a form that your body recognizes.
Right. And to anyone who's asking that question, that's a perfect question. It's brilliant. Like, why would you eat meat? Because I see all kinds of people in the groups, all right? Now they fear it. That's the extreme. If I were, don't take offense to this, people, but if I were lazy, I would do that. And that's 100% accurate. Because then I would not be dumping blood, which is free. I would be afraid of something that's nutrient dense, that probably one of the most powerfully nutrient dense macronutrients on the planet that we know of. Yes, there's super nutrient dense foods, but grass-fed beef, grass-fed animals digest the things you can't. So if I asked your guests and you, what's the most challenging macronutrient of the three macronutrients we have to choose from? By the way, there's three, folks. It's called carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, okay? Fiber falls under carbohydrates. So what's the most difficult, challenging for the body to digest?
I would say carbohydrate.
Okay. And so what would most of your audience and your patients say?
Probably protein.
Okay. I would agree because that's what they're told. And
Yeah.
that's what we were probably taught back in school, right?
Yeah.
When really it was a rudiment version of it. And I'll qualify because this is the carnivore piece.
Yeah.
Carbohydrates, first of all, in a raw nature, those who are eating and drinking kale drinks, their smoothies, their raw spinach, I get it. I've seen you. I've taken care of you.
Yeah.
I love and support you. It's not a personal thing.
Right.
But if you're asking for help for a problem that's related to the gut, that's creating inflammation and pelvic obliquity, in other words, the hips keep getting twisted and your low back is an issue, or you're getting chronic headaches because that's a digestive problem as well. We ultimately now know there's a connection, yes, structurally, but what triggers is the stomach stress creates that. We know there's a link, okay? So given that scenario, if we're not willing to break down on who they said that's good for me, I want to ask, and I say, who's they, number one?
Yeah.
And is it good for you, or is it good for 10 out of the 15 people they're talking about, or the rest of the world? Because I don't care about anyone else right now but you and your results, and what you're asking me to do is solve a problem. So it isn't my way or highway. I need to be right. No. The point is, I'm finding that if you keep putting in those raw vegetables on your inflamed gut, we are going to do circles around nothing.
Yeah.
So until we talk about giving it a rest, I created the Feminine Carnivore cookbook by way of my patients bugging me, as I shared earlier, to do so because the women patients that I was working with it on got the best results.
Awesome.
Where can I find this? And this has been over the years. So finally, just in 2023, I published it. So the unique thing about the carnivore diet, Dr. Brad, and what I didn't want to do is make it an extreme, because someone can follow Paul Saladino, MD, and find that he not only was pure carnivore extreme for his own research and testing, but then he's not anymore. Why? Why? Because he found it didn't work long-term for him.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm coming from, is the Feminine Carnivore cookbook has an array of recipes in that have vegetables, fruits, different things, okay? But every single recipe focuses on getting enough protein. Number one, for the woman, to keep them fertile. Number two, because fertility is directly related to hormones, which is directly related to protein.
Yep.
So it's everything Dr. Brad has been telling you, because it's accurate that, for example, let's take the woman who has painful menses, whether it be severe cramping and or heavy, and they struggle with pain. So that the cramping, the pain is part of that endometrial wall not wanting to be released. Well, why does that happen? Well, the body's intelligent, right? And if you start with intelligence versus stupidity, and that you're broken and something's wrong, then the outcome is completely different, because your solution is going to be different. So in this case, Loomis discovered, and this is where I learned a great deal of it, and I tried it out on my patients, and holy smokes, they got better. Wow, it's so cool. So they would have they might even have protein in their diets, animal protein. So they're eating them. I'll give you a couple of scenarios. And then they just weren't digesting it. And if they're not digesting and assimilating, that's the 3 parts of you are what you eat, when really they're only telling you 1/3 of it. It's not just what you eat, it's whether you can digest and assimilate it as well. Those 3 components make the difference in the outcome. So back to the patient that was eating all vegetarian and kale and raw spinach, was actually hard on the gut, too much fiber, really inflaming. Instead, we pulled them off that. Just go carnivore for 24 hours at a time. One day, can you do that? Can you just do that? Okay, I can do that, because now I still have carbs the next day. Great, we're going to keep that down to 50 grams that day. Okay, the next day is 50 grams of carbs, but have them, and eat how you normally eat. Great, just make sure you got protein there too, animal protein. But on the next day, then we can do just carnivore again. And then you start noticing how you feel. So that's an easy way. That's one way.
Smart.
You can alternate it, 1 day, 2 on of regular, 1 day carnivore, until you get to the point where it's 2 days in a row carnivore, free day for whatever. Watch your body weight change. most of society is going through excess storage. Brad, how about this?
Yeah.
Here's a great way to put it. Everyone's worried about the sustainability of the earth. How about being self-sustainable?
Right. Yeah.
So most of us are carrying excessive energy around on our waists, on the back of our arms, on our thighs, on our butts, some of us on our and wherever, right?
Yep.
And all of those metabolic regions tell us where the system's off. If it's on the back of the arms primarily, it's coming metabolically. If it's around the waist, we know cortisol. We know where the body's metabolically struggling. If it's only in the belly and the legs are skinny and the arms are skinny, it's telling us another story as well with insulin resistance. But the real key is if you become self-sustainable by storing less. So first tip, how do you know you might need carnivore or move towards a carnivore diet? If you're 20, 25, 30, you're young, you want to have a family, you need to be fertile. You need to have enough protein to meet the means of not only your own self-sustainment, your body's maintenance, regulation through homeostasis is primarily protein. You also need to be able to grow a fetus. Which means you have to have a surplus of protein energy to build a life form, right? Isn't that miraculous?
Well, that's that's incredible, and that's we're getting into some of the hormonal things, and it's I've had that with I was eating salads and protein, and I thought at a certain point I can't eat it, and I felt horrible. And it was in vegetables and shaved Brussels sprouts and kale salads with chicken and and had done keto and you're going, I felt horrible. Now, I like the approach that you suggested there with kind of alternating days to do it. You know me well enough to know my personality is if you go, Brad, this is healthy for you. Okay, fine. I'm jumping in. I'm going all in carnivore, and it's nothing but meat, salt, butter for the next 90 days. And there's pros and cons to doing that way. Tell me one of the things that you were kind of going into is one of the big questions that I get. There's two questions. One is vitamins. How do you get vitamins, and do you get deficiencies and all this stuff? So we'll get to that one. The other one, you were starting to go into the assimilation. But then also elimination. And people are like, do you have trouble eliminating if you are on a carnivore diet because you're not getting all the fiber? And how would you respond to that?
This is very easy. There's two parts to it. Number one, most people, if we're going to talk about fiber, we have to go back and just check out the book called The Fiber Myth. It was written by a Russian researcher who was having his own health issues, did the research, found a ton, amazing, just opened up this weird Jahari window for him. He jumped in, came out of there way more involved in it than he ever wanted to be, but he found this gold mine of information like, whoa, they're saying this, but whoa, wait, all this research says just the opposite. Long and the short of it, if you don't want to read. The myth of insoluble fiber masses was started by Kellogg. Kellogg created an industry. He was really anti-sex.
Right.
So he wanted to clean and cleanse humanity and change the sexual drive. And he felt like he could do it through that route. Okay, I'll just summarize and not get into all the science behind that. But if you want more information, check it out. So think about this. It was based on a fallacy, based on something that he wanted to change, and then other like-minded individuals jumped onto that, saw the profitability of the industry, created the industry. Now that industry has become grains, cereal, sweets, and that's breakfast to you. Or let's say it's a bakery piece of something with sweet and sugar and blah, 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 or a Pop-Tart, which is a pastry. And
as long as it's highly processed, right? As long as it's highly processed carbohydrates and Franken carbohydrates like high fructose corn syrup that your body's like, what in the heck is this?
Right. So this whole industry was created, and now they're going to back it up by saying that, this fiber is so good for you. Well, ultimately what you discover is it increases the stool size 4 to 5 times minimum. All right. So now you got a giant, colon filled with expansive fecal matter.
Yep.
And now it's pressing on other things, right? So it's pressing on other soft tissues within the lower quadrant. Women, you have other parts down there with your uterus, bladder, all kinds of things, right? So it creates problems. It creates distension. So now if we just accept that there's a myth around fiber and that there is some value in fiber, we look at where fiber comes in nature. Okay, so grains, husks, insoluble fiber, different than soluble fiber.
Yep.
So as Paul Saladino, again, confirmation if you want to research this, he talks about fruits and how he uses protein in fruit. And I've talked to many of my patients and others throughout who aren't my patients that I've also discussed with at events, and they come up to me and will say, man, I feel the best on animal products like a steak and some fruit, and that's it. And I do really well.
Yeah.
Now, to your point, Dr. Brad, you're going to have less stool volume. That's the first part of the answer.
Yep.
Yes, it is going to be more compacted based on the constituents of the food if it's animal products. So number one, you're going to go a little less volume. That's the first bonus. Number two, it is going to be a little more compact, which is why I'm a proponent of not an extreme carnivore diet. It's not necessary. However, the caveat, the sidebar there would be the patient's goals and how they're presenting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're coming in, you got a little urgency, you're overweight, you're fed up, you've been everywhere else, you're looking for this, and you're willing, I might take you carnivore for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days straight. But I'm not going to take you to carnivore the rest of your life because that is not balanced.
Yeah.
The other side of the physiology is when I learned in keto, which I never finished that part, but I realized I went so far into ketosis, I stopped phase 2 detoxification by not having enough glycogen in my liver to run phase 2. So carbohydrates also send a message to the body that there's abundance and plenty. Now, that's why I would want your listeners to go, I could be more carnivore, but not extreme.
Yep.
And I can benefit if I just reduce my carbs either for windows of time and strategically use carbohydrates. I'll use a fair amount now because I work out and I would need to replenish the glycogen.
Yeah.
Boom, it sucks it up right away.
Yeah.
But I'm in a different metabolic state. I'm also running at a high metabolism.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I know that's something I know Joe Rogan's even talked about that with, he loves carnivore. He feels great. But then he was like, to do workouts. I mean, that guy's doing jujitsu and I mean, all the podcast shows, everything that he's doing. He's like, I noticed I couldn't work out quite as hard to that level. So if you're doing high intensity types of workouts, things like that, I know Sean Baker and some of those, here he's set all kinds of records with rowing and doing that. And they do that. What I've really found and what I've used with patients is, to me, carnivore is the ultimate elimination diet. It got to the point where I didn't like, what can I have? I was doing keto and I remember people would ask, Dr. Lori, my wife, and they'd say, is Dr. Brad sick? And basically what they were saying is, does he have cancer? Because you can tell somebody that's been doing keto for a long period of time, yes, they lose a lot of weight, but they look sickly. They don't look, whereas with carnivore, and like you're saying, there's times I'll have it in some, now I still have to watch. I think my insulin is better. My insulin resistance is better than what it had been. I think I still have some healing to go on with that because I can get away with it for periods of time where I'm adding in some different carbs and things. If I did that every day, I think I can tell I just get so hungry. I can tell now when my blood sugar just spikes and stays up there and I'm like, no, I don't like that. And so like you said, I'll go back the next day and or the next couple days, it's going to be strict carnivore till I can kind of get back to where that's at. So I love that. What about, as we're talking about that, vitamin deficiencies? Cause that's the elimination and the vitamin deficiencies from eating, especially when we talk about this, with grass-fed meat. Obviously, we can get into, and you've got to find in today's world with the expense, inflation, all of the things, I like it said, eat what you can afford, eat the best meat that you can afford. In an ideal world, if you're doing carnivore or those types of things, it would be grass-fed ribeyes, every meat. You want I mean, that'd be great. I'd be happy. And people are like, there's the other question. Do you get sick of it? No. I can eat a grass-fed I could eat a 30-ounce grass-fed ribeye every day and have a smile on my face. So tell me about the I guess the fear of vitamin deficiencies.
Well, why don't you just pick a couple vitamins and let's see.
Vitamin C is probably one of the big ones that people, you go to the favorites of, as we talked about earlier, what people are incorrectly megadosing. Probably so C, D,
zinc,
B vitamins,
magnesium.
Yeah.
Okay. So think about it this way. Why are wild caught salmon healthier than farm raised salmon? You know why, right? Because the food chain allows plankton by minnows, minnows by bigger minnows, minnows by bigger minnows, fish by fish, the biggest fish, predatorial fish, and we get the byproducts of that. If they're bottom feeders, we get the byproducts of the bottom feeding, which are the heavy metals in the belly meat of that fish, which are why certain fish, such as swordfish, are not as good for us as a wild-caught salmon with all the healthy omegas in the food chain with which they consume, all right? Yep. So now when we just understand that nature has this built-in brilliance, I can't even say that well enough to really highlight the actual brilliance behind it, like the unimaginable depth of providence that's there, okay? Meaning, we think we understand, but there's this commercial, I have to say it. I keep hearing it, dog food, and the clever little saying is, science did that. And I'm like, bullshit. You know who did that?
Yeah.
God did that. You've been observing it. You've taken what God put there, and now you tried to patent it, and now you're saying science did it.
Yeah.
And that we're going to outperform God. Good luck.
Good luck with that.
Enhanced farming, natural enhanced farming by using nature, enhancing nature's yield isn't fooling. It's using the laws of nature to enhance yield. And that's what's brilliant. It's not trying to, there's no way we can outsmart it. That's my personal opinion. It's also been my experiential findings. But that's my observation and my hallucination. So if we're going to try to outsmart the body with nutrients, the deficiencies would come by way of you not listening to your body.
Yeah. Yep.
If I'm in a storage mode, I'm storing fuel for a later date, or I'm over toxic and my body's finding a resource to store toxins in, which is adipose tissue.
Yep.
There's also something called POPs, which is persistent organic poisons, which are found in bile, which that's one thing I had to cleanse out by using some nature cool stuff also, which is fruit pectin, which binds to bile. Otherwise, the bile gets circulated back in again. It's reabsorbed in the colon. And that bile is perpetually persistent poisons being exposed in the body. Now, am I saying everyone needs to do that? Hell no. I'm saying these are things that make a difference when you have a provider such as Dr. Brad, who can actually listen to you, focus on what your symptoms, how they're relating, which is part of my answer, because I can't assume that a deficiency for Joe is the same as for Mary, which is the same for this person, because their metabolism, their familial history, their blood type, their whole emotional stress realm, their spiritual, all that ties into how the body utilizes, digests, and assimilates macronutrients to then use the micronutrients to then fuel the body, like you said, with good gasoline.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and if you think about when you're having an animal that's eating grass the way that it's been designed to do, they're not worried about taking nature's way vitamin C or this vitamin or that vitamin. They're getting everything that they need in the perfect combination. And then when you have these ruminant animals that are multiple stomachs, they're naturally filtering this for it. So we're getting the ideal ratio, and it's filtered vitamins and minerals from eating that grass-fed beef. So once again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. God's already done that for us. He's provided that to us. Now, I get and I understand when you start talking about some of the hormones and antibiotics and grain-fed, inflammatory, stressed animals. I get that. Like I said, the ideal would always be, grass-fed meat. Get to know, your farmer or find somebody. And luckily now it seems like there's been a resurgence of that. So I'm grateful to those people that are doing that, because that's not an easy thing. So, well,
Right.
tell me, I guess, is there anything we've hit some really, really good points on this, and I love hearing your story. The diet in and of itself is good and good knowledge, but your story behind it and how you've gravitated, and I can tell and I can hear your passion for this and to share what you've learned to help others. Is there anything else related to this that we haven't gone over so far that you feel would be important for people to know?
It's really in depth. So I apologize. There's a little more on the hemochrome that kind of took that path, but it also helped me realize that each one of your patients are individuals.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
As a doc, I know you do. One of the biggest things I feel like I have to explain with a patient, and it's a brief, but it's respect to the patient. Like, what are your goals? What are your challenges? What do you want to do? What do you want to see happen? And as you know, patients come in with all kinds of different challenges and things with, autoimmune. I see thyroid, a lot of thyroid, partly because of what I know now about it, what they weren't able to solve for me, and they never had any answers. Where did it come from? Why did it happen? And what do I do about it in the future? They don't know anything.
Yep.
They don't even know how to test it accurately because they only look at TSH. And so by way of default, I had to go find those answers. I had to go learn. I had to stay open. I had to open up to the reality that this is something that not only may help me, but if I love helping and want to be of service to mankind, then this is, of course, going to be of use. So I would say this: if you're somebody who can resonate with human potential, then by looking at the carnivore diet, realize there is a spectrum of use for it.
Yep.
The problem I have with keto isn't that keto doesn't work. Keto's awesome. It's that keto's abused.
Yep.
It's that keto's now fad, and it's a bunch of now commercialized or processed, as Dr. Brad said, products instead of real food, and it's also fat abused. Now here's why keto doesn't work, and I did it intensely not only for myself, but then I wanted to share it with patients. And I had too many patients struggle by way of gallbladder issues and digesting fat. And so those are the people who will fail at keto, and they'll actually put their body in detriment.
Yep.
So carnivore is cleaner from the standpoint of it's animal products, but it's focused and it's paleo at the same time. And truly, it could just be called ancestral. The way I use it is ancestral, because I love vegetables, I love fruits, and before cancer, I could eat a salad for every meal, and I'm not kidding. Meaning, the salad always had protein, whether it's chicken or some form of meat, beef, fish, scallops, bacon. Hey, I had it on there, and every salad was different to me, unique, beautiful, all the tastes, love it. But that did not create help, and it was not anti-cancer, I guarantee.
Yep.
So now it's more simplified, it's arguably cleaner, and it's less rigid. I'm not rigid. Yep. I eat fruits, I eat protein, I have some carbs, I never go hog wild in one direction.
Yeah. Yep.
If that's a saying.
Yeah, it is now. I like that. No, I love that. I had birthday cake yesterday for my mother made my daughter a birthday cake for her 17th birthday. And if you think I'm turning down some mom's birthday cake for my daughter's birthday, there's no way. And that's the thing. I think if you're good, a lot of times, I'll tell patients, I'll say, look, do 90% of the program 90% of the time, and you'll get incredible results. You don't have to do 100, and you can use, like I said, I think it's that I know of the ultimate elimination diet, where you can use it to get yourself healthy. And there's different, like you said, different goals People have been under different types of stresses for different periods of time, physical, chemical, emotional stresses, that somebody may need to do it for a longer period of time. They may need to be more strict. Other people can, hey, this works with my body. And so that's why it's good to have someone like myself, Dr. Wade, that understands what's going on, understands what your goals are, and is going to listen to you and find out. Because if somebody says, hey, I'm not going to do it, well, what's the point in, you're a bad patient, you won't do it. Well, no, you need to find what's going to work for them, what's going to be sustainable, and what's going to get them the best health and help them reach their goals. So
right
awesome.
Right
awesome.
on. I mean, and that is a major distinction, to be able to adjust. Like,
yeah,
folks, I am not pure carnivore. I'll tell you right now, but I promote health in my office, and I can adjust. There are hundreds of ways to use that philosophy with a patient that helps them win. And that's what I think you want to find, is somebody who can read either your labs and adjust accordingly based on your goals, but not treat the lab, treat the patient.
Right.
And the lab tells us a story, combine the two, help the patient win, and watch for those parameters to change, right?
You got it. Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tell us, I know you mentioned before, tell us about your, your podcast, your clinic, your practice, ways they can reach you if anyone's got any questions and want to reach out to you.
Perfect. There's some old episodes, both on, there's some keto episodes specifically, Frankly Speaking with Dr. Wade, that can be found on iTunes or Spotify or any of your major podcast platforms. That podcast still lives. It's just not contributed to. But all those episodes are up. There's hundreds on that. And there's Digestion 1.0. There's Iron Toxicity 1.0. So there's great factual episodes there that are still very relevant, still very well researched, and pertinent. And then my current one that I'm contributing to now, and I'm like 40 something episodes, 42 maybe in, is Life Force Radio, also on Spotify and iTunes. And that's also going to be on YouTube as well. I'm just starting to do some videos again. I've been pulled off YouTube in the past for controversial.
I love it.
Around 2020. Yep.
Go figure.
So I had to start over, but I'm always
a badge of honor.
Well, it's a badge of honor because I work for the patient.
Yeah.
I will always go to bat for, as I know you will too.
I love you, brother. Yep.
But yep. I'm not dedicated to any one company / brand, or I certainly don't work for pharma, and I'm not a big hospital or so I work for the patient. So I'm going to say some things that don't always jive, and I'll just find a new platform to put it on.
There you go.
But
love it.
People can find me at drwadeanunson.com, drwadeanunson.com. And they can find the Feminine Carnivore cookbook for free if they'd like. It's a free plus ship. That's all. It's my contribution. I'm going to do that for probably the first 500 copies. Absolutely give that away, or I'll give it away longer. We'll just see, because I just want it in more people's hands where they can adjust. But ultimately, my goal there is to help women restore the balance in the household. And if they don't have energy, the ability to create energy and eliminate waste, we are hosed as a country and as humanity.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that, brother. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here. There's a lot of information. I may have to see if I can get you to come back again to go over some other topics with this. But you gave a lot of great information. It was great just to get to reconnect with you again. This is terrific. So everyone, if you've got any questions about this, love to hear your comments. If you've got other suggestions for future topics, things that this is exactly why people were asking for carnivore, more information on this. So if you've got different topics you'd love for me to go over and address and bring on special guests like Dr. Wade, let me know, leave your comments, and let me know how it goes. Take care.